Guys, I'm here with Matt from AMP, Annealing Made Perfect. You guys may know them for their annealers, but this is the AMP press. Matt's going to give us a bit of a demonstration of it.
All right, so we don't actually have any bullets or cases to demonstrate, unfortunately, but we do have a simulation die. So this is basically a spring and a plunger to simulate seating a bullet with our press, and it also acts as a calibration tool to make sure the press is working properly.
Okay.
So you may be familiar with normal arbor seating presses, where you have your load cell, your inline seating die, and you just put it under and you by hand you press it in. This is basically the same thing, but we've got a load cell which measures the weight or the force, a distance sensor which gives you accurate distance measurements on the ram as it's coming down, and also it's a motorized ram, so it removes the human error. So just to quickly demonstrate, firstly what you do is you put the loaded die, so this in this case would be a cartridge with a bullet inside the die, and you'd put that on the load cell and you would adjust the height of the ram to be just above the plunger. Then you take out the bullet and the cartridge so that the die is bottomed out. And then we calibrate the x-axis. So that ram comes down and then it measures that distance and it sets the x-axis appropriately.
Yes.
And then you'd go ahead and start seating bullets. So in this case you've got a bullet ready to seat.
Yep.
It would go on the load cell, you click go, presses the bullet down, and it makes your force over distance plot.
Ah, wow.
And just to show you how precise it is, if I do that again, it's one on top of the other.
Yep.
I can do it again, and there you go.
Wow.
Now, I do have some saved sessions that show you real bullets, so I'll just quickly get onto that. So if I go in here, open, and let's go in here, and I'll just readjust that. So this is what would be considered a pretty terrible or not a good result.
Okay.
And just to highlight some of the things you might see. So what we're looking at here is this is the x-axis, or the distance the bullet gets seated into the case, starting from fully out to all the way in. And as the bullet comes into the case, the force goes up.
Yep.
Right? Now what we can see here is a lot of x-axis or height variation. So if we just zoom in on this area, what we can see here is if you move the cursor to any point, it gives you an XY coordinate here. So here we're looking at 0.2 of an inch, and here we're looking at 20 thou further out. So a 20 thou variation in your height. Now what can cause that can be an inconsistent length of case, so you haven't trimmed it, or it hasn't been trimmed very well, which usually isn't the case for well-prepped brass. But what we have found is bullets can vary in length quite dramatically. We've found some bullets, even though the weights are incredibly consistent, the lengths can be up to 20 thou variation. So it pays to measure that, but also this will show you.
Yes.
Now the software right now is compatible for Windows and Mac on desktop machines. It's got Bluetooth capability as well, so right now you can see there's no USB cable, it's just plug and play. So you can actually have this as well triggered automatically without having to click anything. So I'll just demonstrate that now. If I go auto run, it asks to zero the weight, to have nothing on it. So we click 0, and that'll just take a few readings there. All right, now you put the weight on. So you put the loaded die on, and you do the same thing. Let's give it a sec. Okay, now that's ready to go. And down here you've got what to do. So right now it says take die off.
Yep.
We take it off, and now it says put the die on.
Yep.
So putting the die on, and it takes a little bit for the first one, and now it's coming down. And of course I didn't get rid of the previous, but yeah.
Sure.
So now I could have the laptop somewhere else and do my loading.
Yep.
And then just come back.
Take it off, put the new one in.
And then I can review the data later.
Okay.
So I don't have to have the laptop right next to it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So basically that's it. Have you got any questions?
I do, Matt. In the this one here, obviously the one you just loaded is straight, and I imagine that's because there's a it's a bit of a simulation.
There we go, I've brought it back.
Where this one goes up and then back down again, what's that showing us?
So this part in here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so typically if you've got a weird chamfer, that can have an initial spike in force, and as the bullet gets seated into the case or starts to go into the case, it can smooth out and you'll see a dip, and then it will start to come back up.
Yeah, right.
What you typically see if you seat bullets past the neck and shoulder junction, so into open air, you'll see this come down again.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there's quite a few interesting things that we're working on as well. So if you look at all these numbers here, you've got a few things that you can actually sort your rounds by. So I can add a few here if I want. So for example, we've got peak force. This is the maximum force read on any trace throughout its cycle. So in this case, because we've got most of our peak forces happening at where the bullet's seated, peak force happens to also be very close to terminal force, which is the final force measured. So as I was saying before, if you seat past that neck and shoulder junction, the force can come down.
That'll drop down.
That would be where a terminal force is less than the peak force. And all I've got to do is click on either of these titles to arrange all of these as per those values.
Okay.
What we've found so far, because people are probably really wondering what's important. Now, this is an ongoing thing that we're working on ourselves. People have told us so far that X-axis start point really matters.
Okay.
And overall consistency obviously really matters. So if you're seeing huge spreads, not a good sign, and especially if you're seeing them here.
Yes. Okay.
We had a guy who was demonstrating the press on YouTube. I'm not going to say who he is, obviously, but he had very, very good traces, very good. But one of them started significantly further in, so a lot shorter, in other words. And then it jumped up into the rest of the group. And we told him on an email, you need to check shot number 6. We think that that's either a short case or a lighter bullet, which would be a shorter bullet. And sure enough, it was actually a 150 grain bullet that made it into his 180s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it can show you that. And it only shows you this part here. So if you were using another force thing that, by hand you can see it, you would definitely see these forces, but you might not pick up the fact that you had this area here.
Because it won't tell you when it starts.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, and then this measures the distance.
So we've actually got some very exciting things we're working on the second we get back. You'll be able to load up all your rounds, go shoot it, and then take note of the velocities of each round, and then enter them in here later on. So you can go shot number 1 was 3,200 feet, shot number 2 is 3,203, and enter that, and then you'll be able to color gradient from fastest to slowest, so red to blue, and then gradually shifting through purple to red. And then what you should see is hopefully, and this is really hopefully because it's still developing,
for sure,
an area in this chart where all of the mean velocities overlap somewhere or congregate somewhere. So it may be that for your load, this area is important for you, or it could be this area or this area. So that's what we're trying to achieve, and we're working on that the second we get back.
Oh, that's excellent. I guess the thing with something like this, that you can buy the press, but there's going to be these software updates that will come in time that allow you to upgrade and develop it using the same hardware.
Yeah, so basically there's firmware on the press and there's the software. So when you get the press, you just go onto our website, you download the latest version of software, and when you connect the press for the first time, we recommend using the USB cable. It'll tell you if the firmware on the press is up to date or not. It'll show up red if it's not, and then you just, in the instruction manual, it says what to do. You just go set up advanced firmware update.
Okay.
But yeah.
Oh, very good.
Oh, and just one final thing. We now have available the 50 caliber kit, which is essentially a larger horseshoe retainer and a shorter ram to allow these big dies to fit underneath the ram.
Yeah, right. You can do that as well. That's awesome. It's great to see some good innovation coming out of the Southern Hemisphere. Cool. That's what we like to see, Matt. Thank you very much for your time.
Cheers.
Cheers.